Hello and welcome. It is episode number 44 of the Hilarious Humanitarians Podcast, where we're going to be talking about fair fighting rules in our relationships. I'm Frances Echeverria, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Hi, guys. I'm Deanna Silverman, licensed clinical social worker.
And we are all over social media. We decided last week we don't quite fall into the narcissistic category. We were discussing that, but we live a lot online. And where can we find you, Deanna?
You can find me at Hilarious Humanitarian on Instagram, Humanitarian Mom, if you want to check out that stuff. You can check out our podcast Instagram page at Humanitarians Podcast. I haven't updated any of the blog section yet, but my website is up, hilarioushumanitarian.com. And you are doing a really good job at doing the blog section on your website. So where can we find you?
Shut Up Skippy is my handle on Instagram, also on Snapchat, and like you mentioned, that website with the blog. And it's been fun. Actually, I've had a few listeners from the podcast hit me up because every Tuesday I do have a new blog. I don't really have a plan when I sit down to write, so it's been kind of an interesting experience, but people have been hitting me up because I want to feature individuals. Sometimes they include their names, sometimes it's anonymous, and that itself can be an interesting process to write anonymously. So yeah, shutupskippy.com, and if you're interested in being a guest blogger, I do welcome you to do that.
I imagine that would be somewhat cathartic for somebody to have a platform that's like, they don't have to do the footwork of like trying to build a website. It's just like a space for you to like get it out.
That's exactly what I was going for. Plus, I can't offer anybody even mediocre fame or money, but it is a place for them to be able to get it out. So why not?
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. So please check that out, shutupskippy.com. So before we jump in to our topic today.
Yeah. Wait a second. Okay. So we have some celebrations that are in order. First, your kids are back in school.
Hallelujah. Thank you, God, Yoda, Allah, Yahweh, all the gods, all the deities that ever exist. Thank God the kids are back in school.
Speaking of school, my husband and I work from home. My husband and I work together, and usually we'll try to eat lunch. Usually I'm just like shoving food in front of his face to remind him to eat. But I decided to play hooky sort of during our lunch break, and we went to the movies and saw Bo Burnham's movie 8th Grade. Have you heard of it?
No, you know what? I haven't, but I was a fan of Bo Burnham when he first kind of broke onto the scene. How was the movie?
It was really good. Really good. And not because I love Bo Burnham. He is 100% my favorite comedian, performer, writer, whatever, I absolutely love his work. But it is just, so the movie is just about an 8th grader in 8th grade. And it sounds really simple, but he does such a good job at honing in the awkwardness, just in the cringiness of being an 8th grader. It's like uplifting. It ends really, really well. The whole story is just really good. But the unique part is like, it's highlighting a girl who's in 8th grade today. So you see like all the social media stuff that these kids are using and the YouTube. And my husband, I just kept looking at him going, oh God, what are we in for? Oh Lord, oh God, I just think everybody needs to see this movie. Everyone.
So my kids started 5th grade and 3rd grade, so I know I'm getting there. But one of the ways that I feel like I stay in touch with that cringiness feeling is working with kids. And high school, like I just got a new client who's going to be a junior, and sometimes as adults, we are really quick to tell them like, oh, it doesn't matter. Don't listen to what kids say or what they put on social media. Meanwhile, as 35-year-old women, we're just as fucking guilty of it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. All right. So 8th grade is the one to see. And plus Bo Burnham is amazing.
And that's a complete, this is not sponsored in any way. This isn't an ad.
If they want to give us money, they can.
Yeah. If Bo Burnham wants to send me an autograph, I would accept. Actually, I have his autograph hanging in our living room. already.
I like
but
it.
if he wants to send me another one, not that he sent me the first one, you know what I mean. So
Absolutely.
I just love it. And I like sharing stuff that I love. So
Well, as we're getting started today, you know where to find us online. We just want to let you know we're going to be covering an article that has 9 rules of fighting fair. And we've also asked you, our listeners, to give us rules that you have for dealing with conflict in your relationship. So there's been some really interesting ones. We'll also talk about.
Interesting. Sorry to interrupt. I just interesting and super helpful. Like
Very
so helpful that I printed them out and I'm going to give them to my husband today.
Just slide them to him.
Yeah, we have new rules in the house, honey. Please read.
Sometimes the best results or feedback comes from, that stuff that's tried in the field of battle, if you will. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about self-care and pushing your comfort zone. We are big on trying to build resiliency and challenge you to do that. But before we get started, our disclaimer. Well, first of all, please subscribe and rate our podcast, but also the disclaimer that this podcast is for informational purposes only, does not constitute medical advice, and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental or medical condition. So when you and I sat down to try and plan for today's podcast, we came across a man by the name of Nathan Cobb. He's a PhD, and he put together a really easy to read 9 rules of fair fighting for couples. And he points out that every sport from basketball to golf has rules to define the game, but often in our most important relationship, we don't know the rules until we've broken them and someone's mad or hurt or angry.
Yeah. And I also realized in reading this article that I didn't follow any of these rules in my early 20s. Not one.
Wouldn't it have been so easy if we'd just had these rules? They come with that moment when you ask somebody to be your boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah, have you read the rule book?
In order to start a Bumble account, you have to pass the quiz.
Yeah.
They could be onto something. So what we want to do is we're going to go through these one by one, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have excuses of how we've done it well or how we've done it poorly. And then also we will go through some of the amazing feedback we got from listeners, because we asked the question, what are your rules? And then our DMs just blew up with great advice. So we'll go through that. So to start, rule number 1, no degrading language. Avoid name calling, insults, put downs, and swearing.
That seems really simple, right? It's kind of like,
though.
You would think, yeah, kind of common sense here. But I'll admit, I've been called names, and I've also probably called somebody, and I definitely have used cuss words in my past. Not anymore, but in my 20s, yes. This rule was broken.
Yeah. Well, real quick, what he points out is that when you intentionally injure your partner emotionally, it's like saying, you're not safe with me. I will do whatever it takes to protect myself or to win. Now, I cuss. I got in trouble for using the F word on my memes. It was recently. Yeah. Don't even get me started. Yeah.
No.
So if you see my stuff up and you see me with really lame attempts at editing out the word fuck, that's why.
Really?
Yeah. But anyway, in personal relationships, well, no, it was suggested that I clean it up. In personal relationships, I cuss. I cuss all the time, to be honest. I mean, I know when it's appropriate and not appropriate, but I can honestly say that I've never really gotten into that calling people names, because my parents did that all the time.
Yes. I gotta be fair to myself. And I need to clarify, I've never called someone a name, but I have cussed.
Right.
I've been called names, and that is really shitty. And I vowed that's never going to happen again. And thankfully it doesn't. But I hear what you're saying. I do cuss as well. I cuss when I'm happy. I cuss when I'm angry. I don't know. I'm still on the fact that somebody told you how to talk, and I'm not.
I know. All right. Well, and you know what? I guess that brings attention back real quick to look, we've actually had people who have messaged you and I to say that, they like listening, but, occasionally the language and kids and stuff. And we get that. So that's why our podcast has the little expletive, the E there. But in conflict, it changes the dynamic. And I know that I'm guilty of that. If you just use it in an argument, like you could not even be yelling at somebody and calling them names, but it definitely makes it from this is a conversation to this is a battle. So what he's saying is don't use insults, put downs, or swearing in general. So guilty, broke that one.
All right. Fair enough.
That's 1 point for Deanna and I. There's probably a rule in here that says don't keep score either, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Fair fighting rule number 2 is no blaming. It's pointless to blame each other. Blaming your partner distracts you from solving the problem at hand and invites your spouse to be defensive, and it escalates the argument. Focus on keeping your goodwill for each other intact and finding solutions to the problem instead of blaming. Oh, I'm guilty. Totally guilty.
Yeah, blaming, it's pretty counterproductive, right? It's just pointing fingers. And every time you start doing that, people get defensive. And then the whole point of trying to get, at least I would like to think that the point is to find a conclusion and resolution. Like you just as it says, it escalates the argument and you just kind of lose focus.
Yeah. And with blaming too, let's be clear that doesn't mean that you shouldn't hold people accountable. I statements are great for this. Taking ownership of your feelings. So when you're late, I feel devalued. Now, I statement, that's an example. I statements though that say, I feel devalued when you're a jerk. Don't have the same impact.
I feel like you're a total asshole.
I get upset when you're a dick. No, that doesn't work. I've actually had to tell clients, because we try and work on these I statements, right? Like I statements are taking ownership of your reaction, your feelings based on a behavior or action of the other person. But I have legit had clients where we've had to work through that because they just don't get that part where where it still turns into the blaming.
Yeah, I understand.
It's a struggle.
It's a skill.
Yeah, and I laugh because I have just as bad of a time of it.
I know. Isn't it true though? Like when we're in front of clients and teaching them things and you're just like, we are all work in progress, and I think that people should know that, like therapists aren't perfect and we shouldn't pretend like we are.
I have found that in practice, I've actually gotten further by letting clients know about screw ups, because there's this interesting kind of balance you try and strike working as a mental health professional or any, I think, time like kind of mentorship role too. Because, there's people that work in the church and in their faith-based services that provide these kind of counseling services on a different level. But sometimes the best examples are the bad examples. Mm-hmm. And when you offer up your own screw ups, you're able to help somebody work through that and feel connected in that humanity, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So rule number 3 from nathancobb.com is that there's no yelling. Yelling only escalates things. Chances are nothing will get resolved when your emotions are running so high. If you're mad and feel like yelling, then it's time to step away and cool down, which is actually rule number 9. I'm a loudmouth. Guys. Do you shut down when you hear yelling?
Yes. Now in my 30s, I do. In my 20s, I would date a lot of guys. Like okay, short answer is yes, but I had to work on that because I used to, whether it was conscious or unconscious, I took it as like a challenge. And, there would be boyfriends that I dated where it was like they were fire and I was fuel, and it was just drama and a lot of yelling. It wasn't too much, but it was just like when we did fight, it was just so unproductive. Now, I think because I dated somebody later on in my, like towards the end of my dating career,
That's what it feels like.
who was really just emotionally destructive and really scary, to be quite frank. So I just realized like pretty quick, I just don't want to engage in it at all. So now I get quiet because I realize nothing good is going to come of it at all.
And it's true. I even noticed that in fights with my kids, specifically my son, because my son is a loudmouth just like me. And it's at a point where if we start yelling back and forth, absolutely zero anything becomes productive. And sometimes it's frustrating because we do it. I know I do it because I just want to be heard. Like I just want him to be quiet long enough to hear what I'm having to say. But when you yell, it is aggressive. It's aggressive by nature, and it causes us to shut down certain parts of us that may need to be vulnerable if we're really trying to solve a problem.
Yeah. And to be clear, I mean, I'm not passing judgment on people that become quiet because they're scared, because it is scary when somebody's yelling at you. I've been there and it is not fun. I don't want to say shut down, but I'm strategically quiet in that moment because I've learned in my years that, like I said, nothing productive comes of it. And I'm trying to mirror or model what I want a argument to look like. And I'm just not going to engage in that at all.
Right. So those are your own personal rules that come into play. Moving on to rule number 4, it's no use of force. Now, I would like to say that this is a given, but unfortunately, it is not. Using physical force or threatening to use force, i.e. a raised fist or even a verbal threat, is absolutely unacceptable. You need to develop the self-discipline to set limits to your anger and your behavior before you reach this level. Pushing, shoving, grabbing, hitting, punching, slapping, restraining, blocking doorways when people want to exit. I've seen that happen because I think
that's illegal, actually. That's illegal, right, with hitting somebody, because it's impeding their will to, it's like restraining somebody.
Right, to exit. And it says that acting on your anger in these ways violates the other person's boundaries and sense of safety. Each of us has a right to be safe and free of abuse or physical danger in relationships. And I think this is where it's really important too. Sometimes stereotypically, we think of the use of force as male against female. And I've seen it, I've heard it, where there are times when women will get aggressive and it's not taken in the same way if a man gets aggressive with a woman. Now, we can spare ourselves the argument over, the differences and all that. But the point is that we need to be mutually respectful of those situations. And sometimes that means just leave. And then if that person wants to leave, do not block them.
Yeah, leave or let leave.
Right, exactly. I mean, they teach us that in school when we're going to become therapists. Never put yourself between the client and the door.
Right.
And so we need to think about that, because there is it does not go well. It is not going to go well if you start adding fuel to the fire in terms of, I think, really like any physical contact or threats of physical contact. So rule number 4, which honestly probably should be rule number 1, is no use of force. And if you are somebody who's in a situation where there's domestic violence going on and safety issues, please check with your local resources to get help for that. There is help for that, and know that it's unacceptable. Rule number 5, this one I think is super important. It says no talk of divorce. In the heat of an argument, threatening to leave a relationship is manipulative and hurtful. So not even just divorce, but just breakup. It creates anxiety about being abandoned and undermines your ability to resolve the issues. It quickly erodes your partner's confidence and your commitment to the relationship. And trust is not easily restored once it's broken that way. It makes problems in your relationship seem much bigger than they need to be.
I was over at my friend's house the other day, and there was like a little arts and crafts thing that their kid made, and I'm going to botch it, but basically it was a crumpled heart. It was a piece of paper, you know, in the shape of a heart, and you could tell the kid crumpled it. And it said something to the effect of like, watch what, like, words are powerful and watch what you say, because like a wrinkled heart will never return to its, you know, original shape. Like once that trust has been broken, and once something has been said that is so hurtful and painful, like telling somebody, you know, oh, I'm just going to divorce you, or using, people oftentimes say like, never say the D word. It's so hard, just as it says that like trust is just, it's not easily restored. And once it's broken in that way, it's really difficult to get back to a place of feeling like, geez, this person might not, or this person might abandon me, or just throw in the towel just like that. Like we're just like a piece of trash, or it's just, you know, so it's just really, really hard. So just like this article says, like, I think there are certain words that should be banned. And if you're seriously not on the way to the courthouse to file paperwork and you're done, do not threaten divorce.
I can say in both of my big failed relationships, we weren't even fighting. We were having like this, we need to talk. And in both situations, the first thing out of their mouth was, should we get a divorce? And I'll be honest, I mean, I'm going to hold on to that in ways, I mean, I've processed it and whatever, but the fact that it went straight there without any conversation of what can we do to fix it, it gave me zero faith. Like, I know I made the right choices in my divorces, but that was just gut wrenching, because that's where I'm the most fatalistic person ever when it comes to things, but both situations, I remember distinctly where I was when those conversations happened. And it was just like, this can't work, you know, for that to come up. And it's still heartbreaking. It still makes me mad. Like, why couldn't we have tried? Like, why did that have to come out of your mouth?
Right.
So no talk of divorce, no talk of like leaving it's over as a threat unless you really absolutely mean it. And if that's something that you're throwing around back and forth on a regular basis, then maybe it's really time to think about, this is not a good situation, period.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay to be divorced. It's okay. If that's what's the best option, then go for it.
Right.
But if it's just used as a threat, or like, this is going to hurt them, I know it's going to hurt them, do not do that.
No, there's nothing good that comes from it. All right. Rule number 6.
Define yourself, not your spouse. Ooh, I like this. Okay. This rule is about being the expert of your own world, not your spouse's world. Use words that describe how you feel and what you want and need, not what your partner feels, wants, or believes. Hey, isn't there like nothing just more frustrating when somebody tells you how you fucking feel? Sorry, I dropped the F word, guys.
It's so true. This is kind of keeping in mind what we talked about with I statements. Own your own stuff. Don't try to imply that you've got it all figured out for them.
Right. It goes on to say, like, more importantly, telling your spouse what he or she thinks, believes, or wants is controlling and presumptuous. And ain't nobody like anybody who's being presumptuous. Don't come at me with that stuff. Whether you are my husband or my follower on Instagram, I have had a few people come after me and be very presumptuous online, and it pushes my buttons. I don't know. That is just like I know some people don't like the word trigger or triggered, but
it's your hot button.
That's my hot button. Do not tell me what I think, feel. So actually, when we talk about self-care, maybe I'll bring that up, because something happened and I just almost, I had a moment.
So with this particular one, I don't know about you, but having the background in working as a mental health professional, I'm going to be real. Sometimes I'm really, really good at nailing it. sometimes I know what's really going on with the other person before they have that insight. And that just comes from years of doing what I'm doing. People can be pretty predictable in some ways. I learned, however, with my last boyfriend, he didn't like it if if I pointed out like what was going on.
Deep-seated things, deep-rooted things that he's not totally prepared for. And you're all, I'm just going to call you out.
Right. Because we need to come to our own conclusions and things on our own in some cases. And I had to learn how to shut my mouth. Even if your partner is involved in a pattern of thinking and you've been with them long enough and you know it, it doesn't matter. Just shut up. Don't say anything.
You're just like, instead, like maybe buy books that may speak to them and just put it on the coffee table and be like, what? This book just magically, I don't know where that came from.
Slide him a book on unresolved childhood trauma.
You accidentally text message them a quote on Pinterest. Oh, sorry, that was meant for Deanna, not you. But did you read it? Did you read it? How do you feel about it?
Hey, you want to take this codependency test with me just for funsies?
Can you imagine? I have friends who are social workers who date other social workers, and I'm like, no, how? Do you just sit there and analyze each other? Like, my dad, every time I hang out with my dad, he's like, are you psychoanalyzing all of us right now? I'm like, probably, but I'm not going to tell you what I think.
Right. Yeah. So this is an interesting one. If you are working, this also, by the way, I think applies in terms of not trying to define what's going on with your partner. This applies if you've done a lot of self-work, meaning maybe you've gone through a lot of therapy on your own. Maybe you've gone through recovery, because some of the most self-aware, insightful, amazing people I know are people who have really worked a program and gotten sober. And so, but with that insight for yourself, you can't be throwing at your partner what they're thinking and feeling. Now there's on the flip side of that, you can challenge them on self-destructive or self-defeating behaviors, but, or self-sabotage, but really, don't try and tell them what they're feeling.
This actually brings up a good follower comment. So she wrote me and she said, I think it was coming from the context of just friendships in general, not so much like intimate partners, but it absolutely does apply to intimate partners as well. And I want to know what your thoughts are on this. She said, if somebody comes to me with like the same issue, I will give them my feedback. But if they come to me more than 3 times, like I'm done. Like I'm not just going to sit here and listen to the same toxic, like complaining and whatever it is. And a part of me, a big part of me, if I'm going to be honest, like agrees with her. Like it's difficult for me to be around somebody who is just complaining all the time and woe is me and not wanting to work at their issues. But on the flip side of that, the clinical piece is like, they're just not ready. But I don't feel like she was disagreeing with that. She was just making a decision. I don't have to stick around and be drug into whatever's going on with them.
Oh, absolutely. And that's boundaries.
Right. So I think she's exerting really good boundaries, and I very much feel the same way, but things get a little more complicated, I guess, especially when you're married.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, come on. Because there's certain things even about my husband. I mean, for the most part, man, he hits a home run every time. Like every time he walks to the door, I am very in love with him, and he's amazing. And we're very much like a great partnership, partners together. But of course, there are certain things that I do and certain things that he does that we've done way more than 3 times that probably irritate the living piss out of each other. And I just, at this point, I'm like, just hoping like, oh God, I hope there's enough time in between the last time he showed me that, that part of his personality that I could exactly like, oh, there's been enough time. And I'm like, oh my God, you are so annoying. In my head. And then we can just move past it.
But this goes back to rule number 1 is that you don't tell him that.
Right.
That's why we have friends. That's why we have people that we vent to, not so that you can sit there and talk shit on your partner, but it's just real. I mean, in my house with my kids, we do this thing. It was kind of an accident actually, where we say, I like you, love you, because sometimes you don't like the person you love, which is okay. But it functions from this place of like, I love you, but right now, maybe you're not being a very nice person, or maybe you're not trying to help me out here, or maybe we're just mixing like oil and water today. But always from that place of, okay, no one's perfect. And overall, this works, whether it's your child, your spouse, your friend, whatever.
I agree. I mean, also just like you mentioned, also having friends to be able to vent to. We also have to be really careful about that, because I know in personal experience that has backfired, where I will confide in a friend and then they use it against me, or now see my significant other in a different light. And we've all been there, where it's like we complain about our significant other and then you make up with your significant other, but now your friend hates that person. And it's like, no, we made up, But for me, I have 2 best friends who I've known now for almost 20 years. We've been best friends, which makes me feel really old to say that. But we have a group text message that we talk, all 3 of us, every single day. And if it's not talking crap about our kids, it's maybe talking crap about our husbands. I'm just like, so this is what he did today. And all of us have just a very clear understanding that all of us love our husbands very, very much. We're not going anywhere. We're never we're not going to get divorced. No one's thinking about a divorce, but I can think that my husband is being an imbecile today because of A, B, and C. And I can get it off my chest. We could laugh about it. We could talk about running away and going on vacation and never returning.
Yes.
We could talk about having, we talk about doing like a sister wives compound, but without the dudes, and then they can like come and visit us and visit the kids, just so I can be around my girlfriends. Like we do that. We talk about that stuff. It's silly. It's lighthearted. We laugh. We move on. And literally the next day we just pick up where they left off, and they love my husband and I love their husbands.
And that's why we need support systems.
Yeah. It's safe. I know they're not going to judge me, vice versa, and no one's going to hold it against anybody. But I will say this, unless it were, and thankfully in our case, it never has gone here. But if I had a friend who was venting and telling me about like the rule number 4 about like their significant others putting hands on them or whatever, like my tune would change immediately.
Oh, absolutely.
I would not be having like a funny, joking, let's just pick up where we left off tomorrow. And I know you love him. And no, I would go into mama bear, mom mode, best friend mode, and be like, no.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between recognizing when things are more dangerous and then things being just normal life. And we're going to annoy we're going to annoy each other. Like I'm sure, whereas there are the groups of, wives that are sitting and complaining, there's the dudes that are, or, whatever the equivalent is in same-sex couples. It's just how it goes.
Exactly.
So rule number 8, this one was interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend about it. It's take turns speaking. Let one person speak at a time. When one speaks, the other should be listening. The important part being that you're really listening and not just waiting for your plan to speak or formulating a rebuttal.
Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. Did we miss rule number 7, stay in the present, or am I?
Oh, yep, you're right. Okay.
Which is really funny. Let's like take a moment though. Rule number 7 is stay in the present, and you missed it. I don't even think you should edit that out.
Nope. This is real live podcasting here. Okay. So, let's, so really quick, Take turns speaking. See, I quieted down long enough for Deanna to point out that I got that wrong. Basically, you know what I'm talking about, though. Don't be listening, waiting to be able to make your next argument. If there's any great example of that, you can watch any talk on politics. No one's trying to change anybody's opinion. They're just trying to argue their own. And that's not going to work if you're really trying to solve a conflict with your partner.
Right.
So, rule number 7, go ahead.
Rule number 7, stay in the present. So we stay in the present and resist the temptation to use the situation as occasion to bring up other issues from the past. It's discouraging to keep bringing up the past. You can't change the past. You can only change today. You can look forward to a better future. Try to keep your focus on what can be done today to resolve the issue at hand and go forward from there. If you get off topic onto other issues, stop yourself and agree to get back on track. You can always come back to other issues later. This is really important because I've personally experienced this. I'm sure millions of other people have too. When you apologize for something, you've changed the behavior. So I feel like your apology is legit because there is nothing worse. There's a lot of things worse, but I hate it when people apologize for something, but then they do that something again. And it's like, hey, your apology doesn't mean jack shit when you do that. So if I've apologized for something and I've changed the behavior as to not hurt you in that specific way ever again, but you still bring up the thing that I've apologized for as ammunition in an argument, holy cow, you have now found another triggering hot button thing for me. I cannot stand when people do that. It is so unfair. It's, once again, extremely unproductive. Nothing good comes of that. And it's just like you had previously mentioned, like the taking like a tally, like that mental checklist. I've had boyfriends before where we'll be arguing and they come up with like this checklist of shit that I did apparently to them like a year ago.
Yeah,
and they just start rattling off all these things that they are mentally keeping track of, but never let me know that they were hurt or feeling frustrated. And it just all kind of blows up. And then I get to hear this laundry list of all reasons why I suck.
And I think there's a fine line, and you bring this up in that real apologies are not just words, they're change behavior. Now, we don't want to keep bringing up the past, but if there is, and it's like, if there is a pattern that has not changed, then it's absolutely important to bring it up. Meaning, like, for instance, one thing that I could see being like a real issue for me is people that don't follow through on plans, leave you hanging or cancel last minute. Just because you say sorry, but then continue to do that to me, I'm going to bring it up because it's a pattern of behavior that hasn't changed.
Right.
Now,
if you're also a really busy lady. I mean, even if you weren't busy,
it's just
that would be really annoying. But especially when people's lives are so jam-packed, it's like you're making it a priority, and then to feel like somebody is just like, whatever, you're not important enough.
I look back at sometimes, and it's been, I've been divorced over 2 years now, but 2 years ago when I was really starting to date, I guess, I would let these dipshits cancel on me last minute or not follow through on plans. And I'd just be like, oh, it's cool. I'm understanding. That's fine. But really, I'm not. But in this like lame attempt to just try and seem like it didn't really bother me very much. And I realized it wasn't until I started having higher expectations for some of my friendships and then in dating. Now it's not even a question. If you I was literally like dating people who it was going to be a crapshoot if they would show up. What was I doing? Seriously, that's sad. But now it's no question.
Live and learn, figure out what our self-worth is. And now we're not going to expect anything less than what we deserve.
Yes. And so sometimes what's been the greatest situation for that is just having those corrective experiences with not people you're dating, but just like your friends in your circle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can raise your standards. So Rule number 7, which we did out of order, stay in the present.
All right. Rule number 8, take turns speaking. Wait, have you ever used a talking stick?
No, but I've heard about them.
I have never used a talking stick with my husband or with a boyfriend, but I have used a talking stick with, I will always remember it, my best friend. She was getting married, and I don't know what the heck was going on, but all of us girls were super emotional and just at each other's throats. It was the day before the wedding, and 4 of us piled into this minivan. I don't even know whose van it was. We were like 25 years old. We parked it in the middle of a parking lot, and I found a hairbrush on the ground, and I was like, this is the talking stick. And I literally made us all hold the talking stick while we opened up and discussed what was bothering us. And at the end, we all cried, and then we felt better, and then we could move on. But I swear, if we didn't have that like minivan hairbrush powwow, we would have been going at each other's throats like during the wedding. And I was like, I don't want that to happen.
Maybe more couples need to have a talking stick. And as we mentioned, you don't get physical with anything, especially the talking stick.
Yeah, exactly. No striking people with the talking stick.
I've seen those before in group settings, like group therapy sessions.
Really?
Yeah, where people have used those. And sometimes, because especially we have to think about too, if you've grown up in a situation where you haven't learned healthy conflict.
Yeah.
So it can be a way to just kind of pause it. And I know it sounds really juvenile, but all you need to do is sit in a heated work meeting once to realize that sometimes we can act really juvenile.
Yeah.
So
also at an elephant gift exchange.
Oh yeah, those are important too.
People get real rowdy.
Oh yeah, they do. We do a gift exchange like amongst the adults around Christmas time in our family because we have such a big family. It gets real. It gets really real. Everybody threatening each other, trying to steal. All right. Rule number 9, and then we're going to get into some of these listener submissions, is when necessary, use timeouts. Violating these fair fighting rules is typically a sign that you've already crossed a threshold physiologically, in which signals from the more primitive emotional centers of the brain have begun to draw out the signals from the more rational parts of the brain. Stress hormones are flooding your body at this stage. Self-preservation becomes the focus. And in this fight or flight state, creative problem solving and mutual cooperation is unlikely. I love that. This is explaining that when you get this worked up, you literally cannot function logically. So taking a timeout is important. Someone pointed out and sent us this message. She said, after lots of trial and error, my husband and I have decided it's okay to go to bed angry. Sleep in a new day can do wonders for our perspective and keeps things from being said in anger that we'll regret later. I love that.
I love that because I used to take the stance of like, no, we can't go to bed angry. And my mom, oh man, she used to drive me crazy with this, is because my mom's dad died when she was really young. I think she was like 14 or 13 years old. And apparently there was like fighting happening in the house, and then he died of a heart attack. That when I was a teenager, my mom and I would get into these like crazy like arguments, and I would be so furious with her. And she would like come into my bedroom and be like, like I'm trying to go to sleep, and she's like, you need to tell me you love me. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you, get out, and I get what she was doing. Like that was just her operating from a space of fear. Like,
right.
Like if one of us dies tonight, in some freak accident, I don't want the last thing that was said was to be a fight. And there are parts to that I've taken with me. Like all my friends, I tell them I love them. My husband, I tell him I love him like 25 times a day. We're very much a family. Like,
yes.
It doesn't dull the message at all. I've met people that are like, I don't say it all the time because it takes away the meaning. Not me. No. Personally, the more you say it, the more love grows. So while I understand what she meant by that, when I grew up and I was like in my 20s, I interpreted it. I interpreted it in a funky dynamic or this funky way of thinking like, no, this needs to be resolved now. I don't care that it's 2 a.m. in the morning and we're fighting. This needs to be resolved now. Like, I did not like the idea of going to bed. And now as a mid-30s woman, I've gone to bed mad plenty of times. Like, I'm like, you know what? We got a guest room for a reason. You go in there, I go in the other bedroom. I'm going to take a bath. We're going to talk about this tomorrow or maybe even the day after that, but it's not going to happen right now.
Right. And I think that's the important part is if you do have to take a timeout, especially for someone like me who panics, sometimes I need to know we're going to talk about it. So we had a few people that brought this up. They figured out what their sweet spot is, right? Maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's one night's sleep, but to make sure that you make the commitment to come back to it, because we can get real manipulative with this with like, I just can't handle anymore. I need a break. And then there's avoidance and there's no sort of closure or coming back around to it. So if we are going to really call the nuclear option, meaning we need to take a time out, we need to break, this isn't working, we have got to make a commitment to come back when we are in a better place. And that can't be a month later when the next fight happens.
Yeah, that is a wonderful point to make. And people really need to understand the importance to that. Like, you can't just, oh, I feel better now, so it's done. Like, you can't leave your person hanging. That's not fair. Right. It just causes way too much uncertainty, anxiety, and it's just disrespectful. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that were said or unsaid, and it just needs to be resolved. But you can't, just because you're feeling better doesn't mean you get to now shove it underneath the rug or whatever. You just need to have the confidence to know that you guys do have the ability to learn skills and learn how to communicate with each other, to have difficult conversations in a respectful way. That doesn't mean you're feeling better, so now obviously like we can just walk away from this.
I know some people too deal with, I know I've done it where when you've smoothed things over, you don't want to bring it up and shake things up or rock the boat. But sometimes the best time to have, we call it meta communication, which is communication about communication. The best time to have those conversations is when there's nothing triggering you, when you're not mad, when you're rested, when you have food in your stomach and time to handle things. And so I think it's really important to have those tune-ups and those check-ins on a regular basis. And like we said, if you're needing to take a break because you're just done, in this article, it says a timeout should at least be a half hour long, but no longer than 24 hours. Make sure you make the plan to come back.
Yeah.
So we wanted to get through some of these suggestions. We've mentioned a few sprinkled in here. One that I would say is a fair fighting rule for me is that apologies never include the word but.
Yeah, and that brings me to another point. Apologies need okay, this is like, to me it's like, it's such common sense, but it's really not common sense, because I've had somebody do this like recently where like your feelings are hurt, you're hoping for an apology from the person, and in addition to saying but, they say something to the effect of like, well, sorry that your feelings got hurt, sorry that you feel that way. Not, I'm sorry that I made you feel this way. Like, taking ownership. When people are looking for an apology, what they're doing is that they want to understand, they want to know that you understand that whatever they did or said hurt them, and that you're genuinely sorry, and that you're going to make an effort to not do it again. So I just recently did a post on Instagram where I talked about, like, if someone tells you that you hurt their feelings, you don't get the pleasure of telling them otherwise. You may not even understand why they're hurt. You might even disagree. You might be sitting there thinking, you're hurt over that shit. If somebody said that to me, I wouldn't even give a shit. Like, it just wouldn't be a thing. However, if you care about your friendship or relationship with a person, then express empathy, ask for forgiveness, learn what you did or said that hurt them, and do your best to not do it again. It's literally that simple.
Right. And honest best not to do it again. Like, oh, I messed up. You know what's one of the worst kind of apologies is, well, like, let's say you call someone out for being a poor friend and they go, yeah, I know I'm a bad friend. And then that's it. Because I've seen that. I've witnessed it. I've heard it. I've had, and so it's this, well, I'm a bad friend, but you just keep choosing to be friends with me. There's zero accountability.
That sucks. But in a way, it's kind of a blessing because they're just telling you, it's like, this is what I am. So take it or leave it. It sucks. I'm not saying it's not hurtful. If somebody said that to me, I would be like, geez, God, okay. What do I do now? But what I can do is decide, am I going to remain friends or with somebody who is that insensitive to everybody else around them and just basically laughs at the fact that they're not being a good friend? Or do I go, well, thanks for at least being honest.
Right.
And now I'm choosing not to be friends with somebody who openly admits to being a bad friend.
Imagine that. Standards.
Yeah. And also not convincing the person who's saying to you they're a bad friend that they're a good friend. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, there's been plenty of times where I will say things like a generalized silly comment like, I just hate people and I hate having fun and going out. Like, I'm just being moody and bratty.
Uh-huh.
That's not the truth. And if somebody said to me, Deanna, no, you don't hate all people. Stop being dramatic. I probably would like crack a smile and be like, you're right. I'm being moody today. That there's a difference between that and calling your friends out and being like, you got to give yourself some more credit. Like when our friends are like trying a new lifestyle and getting back on track and they mess up and eat a donut and they're like, I'm always going to be overweight and just yuck. And they're like really being negative. It's okay to step in and be like, no, stop that. You're doing great. You had a mess up. You're human. Let's move on from it. You're doing amazing. Compared to the person who is literally making us feel bad all the time. We get the nerve to talk to them about it. And then they say, well, I'm just a bad friend.
Yeah, exactly. There's the difference. Flipping it on you.
There is a difference. Somebody wrote me, and I really like what she said. It's mixed in with everything that we've already discussed. But she said, this is a great topic. I think people don't talk about this enough. We're going to have fights, but then there should be ground rules, obviously. You can't burn everything to the ground because someone didn't meet your expectations on one day of a lifetime of a relationship. My husband and I have established early on, way before we even got married, that swearing, name-calling, hanging up on each other, and claiming that someone always or never does something were all big-time button pushers for us.
That's so great smart
point. I lose my mind, at least internally, when somebody uses the word always or never.
Mm-hmm. It's
like too it's just too definitive. I might have done that. I can take responsibility for the fact that I sometimes do this thing that annoys you and let me fix it. But for sure, I don't do it all the time. And it's hurtful too, because I've been working on certain things in my own personality and conflict resolution where there are things that I try to work on, like being really, because my husband and I, we have a very busy life like everyone else. We should be making time to like reconnect with one another and be really complimentary to one another and make each other feel wanted. And so sometimes I have to consciously remember, like, geez, you haven't even kissed your husband today, or said something really nice, because it's all hustle and bustle and we're working together and we've got this family business. And so if I'm working at being complimentary, and if he were to turn around and be like, you never say anything nice to me, like in his mind, there might be more room to say more nice things or more opportunities to connect. But for sure, it's not fair to tell me that I never do it. It's just, it makes you feel like well, shit, if somebody's going to feel like I never do something or I'm always screwing up, and then in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm actually trying. I've had clients who got sober and haven't relapsed and told me, like, my family continues to accuse me of using and I haven't, and I don't want to. But if I'm honest with myself, like, when you're being hounded and accused of something that you're not doing, it's almost like, what's the point of even trying? If you're going to make me out to be this person that I'm not. And, like, I'm not saying all people feel that way, but I can empathize with somebody who feels that way. Cause I know that I have worked on certain things and then somebody's thrown it in my face and acted like I've never even tried. And it's like, God, if you're not going to like see me for who I am and the work that I'm trying to do and make me feel less than, like, there are moments where it crosses my mind, like, why even try?
What's the point? Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is it's not true. It's not true if you say you always, you never. It's just not. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at just from a semantic point of view. So yeah, we have to keep that in mind, that it's shutting down the conversation. It's not allowing for opportunities to growth. Now, for growth, that doesn't mean that you hold on to things or let people slide too much. I mean, but to just keep that in mind, that it's not really, you're not coming at anybody from a place that's good when you come out with that.
Somebody else wrote me and said, let yourself feel your feelings before you confront someone about this.
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
Be mindful of how you express your feelings. The goal is communication, and usually the reason conflict occurs is because one or more people feel like they aren't being heard or validated.
Some of the best time, and this is with my ex, when I have to deal with co-parenting issues. If I'm mad, I do not call him. If something has happened, I call up my friend and I go, you're not going to believe what happened, blah, 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 get it all out, feel the feelings, all of the feelings, and then get my composure, and then I can make a conversation. So these things that we're talking about in dealing with conflict don't just apply to the person you're like sleeping with or your immediate family. These are important things to keep in mind too if you're just having to co-parent because you've split up with somebody. Yeah, absolutely. Another response we got was no low blows, literally in simple enough. And I completely agree. Have you ever been arguing with somebody, or, not arguing, but having a disagreement about A, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, you're ugly. I mean, that's a really juvenile example, but it happens. And my mom was a fighter like that. Like, when she would argue, and my dad, like, my mom has literally been gone for almost 10 years. She died almost 10 years ago. And my parents were divorced for like 10 years before my mom even passed away. But my parents were really close even after they got divorced. But, a part of remembering, at least this is how I feel, like a part of remembering somebody after they've passed, I can still talk about the bad things as well as the good things. Like, it's just, I think it's totally normal. And my dad will seriously still bring it up, like, man, and when your mom fought, she really went for the jugular. Like, she would just let you have it. And I'm like, yep. And it sucked. Like, and that's why I just never... So this kind of brings me to my next confession, or I don't know how to say it, but my husband, when we argue, I never call names. I try to stay on topic as much as I can, and I try to not bring old feelings from my past, even like before him, like triggering things that happened to me before him. I just try really, really hard to stay in the present. My husband, on the other hand, and I even asked him, I'm like, is it okay if I talk about this? I don't want to paint you in a bad light. Yeah. And he's like, go ahead, talk, whatever you need to say it. But my husband is convinced that him cussing and getting loud and yelling is equal to me arguing and having like an elevated tone.
And I'm like, well, so I don't like, if I don't cuss, it's still on par with you cussing. And
Right.
He's like, yeah, because you've got this like tone of voice. I'm like, okay, while I can understand and appreciate somebody who doesn't want to hear somebody's tone when they're mad, I try to like, I'm like, what do you expect from me? To have like a happy tone?
Right.
When I'm angry? I mean, it's just, it's an ongoing conflict. And I'm happy that my husband and I don't argue or disagree that much. We've been together for 4 years, and I could literally like count on one hand how many times we've had an argument or a disagreement or a fight, whatever you want to call it. But it still bothers me that he thinks that cussing is equivalent to me not even raising my voice, Frances. This isn't even me raising my voice.
I get it.
It's just my
Yeah, I get it. Cause I have resting bitch face, and I also have just a very dry tone. I don't get emotionally like high or I feel like sometimes that's even more offensive to someone when they're getting really heated and you're staying really level, and it's almost as abrasive or grating on their nerves as if you'd be screaming. That's exactly what he's saying, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, no, and I know that you and I have very similar arguing styles. Like we pride ourselves on like, and that's another things I've told him before. Like I pride myself on being able to like, oh God, am I going to admit this? Like,
do it.
All right. I think we've had this good discussion. Like I pride myself on being able to rip you a new one without cussing, without yelling, without even raising my voice. In fact, I might have you start to re-question your entire existence on this planet after I've really... Look, what am I admitting?
You're admitting exactly what I admit. I could burn someone down from the inside out.
without even batting an eye.
Look, I've done a lot of reading on this. Actually, I finished a book not too long ago by this monk, where she talks about how we need to embrace. We're always talking about being positive and understanding our good. We really need to embrace our dark, because and I don't mean act on your dark, but know that your dark exists, right? And in doing so, you can have a really healthy understanding of your full range of emotions. I would be lying if I said, and these are people I love, but we all have a dark side, right? You can call it the shadow, you can call it your ego, you can call it whatever. I could look at someone I love so much and would never hurt, and know every way I could rip them to shreds. And so when I fight, I don't want to go there. So I have to be really cognizant of that, because you can do that under the guise of, well, I'm not arguing. I'm not fighting.
I'm not yelling. Yeah, I get it.
But one thing I do love, and this is something, and look, I'll be honest, it's a little manipulative, but sometimes it's good. I've had arguments where a partner is trying to get me to fight. They want to, right? Because for some people, they want you to engage and get passionate, because for them, that's their story. That means that you love them, right? Like you love enough to fight. And I've looked at partners and said, I love you too much to call you bad names. I'm not going to do it. And there is nothing fucking worse for them in the world. Like they would rather me call them every bad name in the book. And I know that when I say it. I'm just like, no, not going to do it. And so one thing that I tell clients all the time when you're trying to break this pattern, and I've had to do it too with really toxic relationships, not just partners, but friends or family, is do not give them the bullets to shoot you with. Because the minute you say something mean, it's coming back at you. Full force.
Yeah. Also, but you know what I do? I wish he was here to defend himself. Not that I'm trying to talk crap
I don't think that your husband sounds like a bad man.
Yeah. No. But is it accurate to say that I could work on sounding condescending based on what I just said? Like I don't yell. I call names. I don't know what the right word is.
We can sound a little snarky.
Yeah. I fully admit to that.
So we had a bunch more feedback, and I wish we had more time to get to it, but we just want to say thank you to everybody who had their rules. And so by all means, if you want to share more of your rules, you're welcome to do so on our social media pages, and I'm sure people could get a lot of help out of that. As we're wrapping up, though, we do like to share a feel-good news story.
Yeah, I love Reddit. I have been a user of Reddit for a very long time. This is kind of like a terrible story turned good in the sense that the family is probably going to be closer to closure. There's a subreddit called What's This Thing? And so on Thursday, there was a fatal hit and run accident, and the person, obviously, like I said, they hit and run. They had a tiny piece of the car, and authorities really were at a loss. They weren't sure who it was, and I'm not sure how somebody got a hold of the picture, but they posted it on Reddit in the subreddit, What Is This Thing?, which is dedicated to identifying obscure objects, plants, and animals. And I love this subreddit. Like, people will just be like, what is it? Literally, what is this thing? And within like seconds, people are like, oh, it's a antique blah, blah, blah from ancient Rome and blah, blah. And it's just like, what?
They're just smart. Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody, his username is Jeff's Nuts.
Okay.
Like, of all handles, now it's like gone viral. He was able to identify this black piece of metal as a section of a Chevy Silverado headlamp bezel on like year 1988 through, like crazy. And so the detectives were able to make an arrest
because of that?
Because of this dude on Reddit being able to identify this little tiny piece of metal. And he was like, I was honestly just logging on, having a bit of fun, just not having fun, with the.
Well, yeah, but he didn't think he was going to solve a hit and run.
Right. And so the reason why I bring it up as a good feel-good news story is obviously we don't feel good that somebody has died, but I'm happy that, first of all, social media came together and basically cracked this investigation, and they were able to make an arrest. So we talk about social media being crap all the time and nothing good happens on there, but we tend to disagree. This is a good example. Also, now the family of the person who unfortunately was killed will be, they'll be closer to some kind of closure, and being able to know that this person is going to be held responsible.
That is
justice will be served.
That is a great use of resources that, when we talk about how social media can be an issue, there's also these opportunities to connect with people who just literally can crack a case, which is kind of crazy. Okay, so now that we've got the feel-good story taken care of today, how about you're pushing your comfort zone or self-care, Deanna? What have you been up to?
Oh, have I been up to something? So all last week, I weaned my daughter. I was successful in weaning my daughter from breastfeeding.
You got your boobs back.
I got my boobs back. I got my sleep back.
Yes.
We talk about self-care, like getting enough sleep. For 2 years, I've had very little sleep.
Right.
And my husband says that our daughter was like cramming for the finals. Like, she knew something was up. Like, she knew. Yeah, the time was coming. And she's like, oh God, I got to get in where I fit in. And oh God, she was just constantly on my boobs. And she's 2 years old. She's walking, running, jumping. She's huge. And so it was very emotional, very overwhelming. There were many times where I'm like, I can't do this, and I'm just going to nurse until she's in college. I don't care. But it just came to a place where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And honestly, I feel like it's affecting my mental health. I feel like it's affecting my physical health, definitely. And also, like, I feel like it's affecting her sleep. She was waking up so often in the middle of the night because she could smell me and wanted to nurse. And so, yeah, all last week, every day, I hunkered down for 7 days, and I'm like, we are doing this. And now she sleeps throughout the night.
Yay.
No nursing. I cannot believe I made it.
That is fantastic. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. Thank you. What did you do for your self-care this week and pushing your comfort zone?
I made a meme. I'm not even lying. I made a meme. I caught myself. Okay, so I've been sharing
was this the meme that you then got scolded for?
No, this was my Kermit meme. Everybody has seen that meme, right? Where it's Kermit the Frog, where like you're doing something healthy, and then there's like the dark Kermit who's telling you to do something else.
I love that one.
Okay, so I made one, and I'm gonna find it here. Because I had this moment of clarity where I realized exactly what I was doing, and it was horrifying. So healthy Kermit, me, is saying he's nice and he says all the right things, all the things I've been telling my friends I want in somebody. And then there's also me. He's too stable. Block him.
That is a good one. I like it.
I noticed what I was doing. So I don't know. Look, I don't know. I'm really always hesitant to say how my life is going with this. I'm not going to say shit show that's dating because I want to be positive about it. However, what I will point out is that I noticed I was self-sabotaging. So here's like a nice person. He's sweet and makes plans ahead of time. And I'm like, Francis, do not flirt with him. Do not give him any indication that you have any hormones in your body or you're the least bit sexually attracted to him. And at one point I went, what the fuck are you doing, you dummy? And so I just kind of let it down and we'll see what happens. But I made that meme because I needed to call myself out on it.
Good.
So that's my comfort zone pushing. And it was self-care too. So anyway, that's what I did. I made a meme.
Humor heals.
Yeah, it does.
Humor heals.
So as we're wrapping up, please go ahead and rate our podcast, rate and subscribe. We're always looking too for your submissions, your recommendations for topics to follow and cover in our podcast. And you can find us online.
You can find us online at H Humanitarians Podcast on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Hilarious Humanitarian or at Humanitarian Mom.
I'm sorry, but do you hear the meowing? Because that's the kitten.
That's okay.
You have a baby that wants to be like fed, and I have a bottle-fed kitten gremlin who's evil. Anyway, this is a professional podcast, I swear, that we don't get paid for. HilariousHumanitarian.com.
And Francis can be found at shutupskippy.com, shutupskippy on Instagram, and shutupskippy on Snapchat. Yes?
Yes. And we thank you for hanging out with us for our edition this week that required you to do a little work. So thank you for that. Please fight fair with your loved ones, and we'll be back next week.
Bye, guys.